In this video, I want to show a silly dinosaur video from China. But first, I want to share this screenshot that I took from Reddit, who knows how long ago. MIT study explains why laws are written in an incomprehensible style. The convoluted legalese used in legal documents helps lawyers convey a special sense of authority. The so-called magic spell hypothesis. The study found that even non-lawyers use this type of language when asked to write laws. And what this reminded me of was, well, things like the Catholic Church using Latin and not allowing the plebs to even hear what they're saying and pretending that it's this elevated thing. But you also get this with the medical system using all sorts of Latin and big words for things, and how it is a type of spell. Spellcraft has to do with words, and so it is a spell, the fact that doctors use big fancy terms for things instead of just speaking more plainly. And really every field ends up doing this, coming up with specialized language. And have you noticed how when you're first breaking into anything, really, any sort of hobby, at first it's kind of scary and you hear all these words being thrown around, but you spend a couple years in the hobby and it feels very natural, and none of it is nearly as deep or scary or as complex as you once thought in the beginning. And so, I mean, words are very interesting. Language is very interesting. And the pen is mightier than the sword has to do with this idea that the words shape reality in a way that is even stronger than iron, people killing each other with weapons. And so another one, dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, they're given crazy long names on purpose, and it's spellcraft. It's a magic spell that they have the large fancy names. If they can have some 32 letter term for something, then it must be true. How could they make something up like a brontosaurus from the paleo whatever era? And yeah, it's part of the magic. Let's watch parts of the video. Really interesting stuff comes out of China. China is known to be fakers, and Chinese, not that I watch a lot of it, but I've seen some videos and cringe at how bad the CGI is. Apparently China outer space stuff is like the most ridiculous out of all of it. And that's kind of interesting that you would think if everybody could go to space, it would be the same kind of thing. But China space stuff is just on another level of bad quality. And what about this? Tell me what you think of this. 72 million years old. Amazing. They always have pinpoint accuracy.
One of the best preserved dinosaur embryos ever found and reported.
This person, in my opinion, is showing some duper's delight. A lot of smiling going on when talking about this subject.
In science, and because it is so well preserved, we can observe its. And
have you noticed how they talk about science? They bring up proven by science, and that's just like, boom, the gavel hits the table. This is solidified in truth. Or scientists say they can use the word science, and that immediately makes people assume this is truth that I'm hearing about.
Posture very clearly, which allows us to compare it with other dinosaurs as well as modern birds.
So I'm not saying that strange and unusual creatures didn't live in times past. I do believe that there were eras with giant creatures around, and the Bible talks about very interesting creatures like the Leviathan, I think is true, and I think unicorns used to exist. So I'm not closed off to the idea of there existing strange and unusual creatures in times past. But dinosaurs are just an outright hoax. They take other bones of other animals and stitch them together. Like they'll take whale bones and then put them in weird orders and mix them with other bones, and then they make a plaster fake skull. Usually the skulls are just fake, like the T-Rex and megalodons and stuff. I mean, I guess I'm open to the idea of maybe possibly there were ginormous shark-like creatures in times past. I don't know exactly, but I do know that T-Rexes are fake. Brontosaurus, that is fake. I mean, how often have they come out with, wait, Brontosaurus was this other thing, it's not real, but then they try to say it was again? Who even knows? Who cares? It's just bread and circus. Well, this is the circus part, I guess, of science. And it's a distraction. And you can tell that it's heavily forced on children. All their fake stuff gets forced heavily on children because you just indoctrinate them early. So here in this China video, I'm going to play more of it. Well, one thing that stuck out is the 72 million years old. Radiocarbon dating is a hoax. Carbon dating is a hoax. For when they get on the million of years things, it can't even be carbon dating because the half-life of carbon-14 is so short compared to millions of years. They have to pretend that it's these other things. But who was there 72 million years ago to know how much of these radioactive materials they should have started with? How do we travel back in time 72 million years to know what the initial levels were of these things? Who has a dinosaur so we know how much of this radioactive material was present way back then? And you see it all falls apart. Nobody can travel back millions or billions of years to collect data on a starting point. When you build a model, you need very accurate information for the starting point of your model. Otherwise, when you're blowing up these things to proportions of millions of years, even a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of an error is going to make your answer so wrong. When you have a model and you're making your model predict things millions of years in the future, any little mess up, any little deviation is going to throw off your answer so much because a percentage of millions is huge. But they always just state it like fact. This thing is 72 million years old. They don't say plus or minus this many, and there's a reason why they do that, because it's bullshit. If this was real, legitimate science, they would include their error. They would include the interval. We estimate it to be, we're 95% confident. This is how real statistics works. You're 95% confident that it's in this, and then you have to give a range between this year and this year. So when somebody just confidently shouts out, oh, 72 million years old, it's bullshit, and there's probably a reason they like that number 72, which we'll get to. We got some dupe and delight. We're pointing. In my opinion, it's just an art project. Somebody just made this. Like, how could you prove that somebody didn't just make this a year ago? Didn't just make this 2 weeks ago? Well, I think this is more than 2 weeks old, this video, but you get what I'm saying. And that's the thing about museums too. It's like you'll never know. Am I looking at a real object? Am I looking at a reproduction? And usually museums will only display reproductions, and they'll tell you, oh, we have the real thing in a basement somewhere. Okay, notice the music and the children stuff. This is like stuff children do, where you have, like, think of somebody had to come up with this footage of putting sand on top. This is probably just stock footage, but look at the childlikeness of this is something that I want you to notice in this video. How they treat people like children with this information, probably because they start this brainwashing with a child, so they just keep it going. They keep the childlike aspect of outer space and dinosaurs. And yes, the whole thing about dinosaurs is people can't even look at chickens today without saying, look, it's like a dinosaur. So that's how the programming, they always want your mind to go there. And that's why they're consistently talking about birds. Birds are from dinosaurs. Birds are from dinosaurs. Birds are from dinosaurs. Because they want, so that when a human looks at a chicken, they go, whoa, look, it's like a dinosaur. So people literally, their brains live in this weird constructed matrix where the first thing that they go to, their mind goes to something that allegedly was here millions of years ago. Like, how crazy is that? We can't just look at a chicken and be like, Yeah, that's a chicken. It's people, the first thing they say when they see a chicken, that's like a dinosaur. To me, that just shows you the brainwashing. It shows you that people live. Where people live is a construct of the mind, and it is so heavily influenced by their indoctrination into the Masonic BS system. I'm going to skip through just because, here's the smirky,
we see the whole
say.
skeleton very clearly, although some body parts are still embedded inside the dinosaur egg.
Too much dupe and delight on that one for me. They had some really cool, day 17, day 18, 19, 20. Anyway, this was all about chicken. Oh, dinosaurs are just like birds. That's what the main thing of this. Here we go. We're getting to the good stuff.
Using its beak. And this behavior has long been thought unique to birds. But now we see evidence in our fossil that even in non-bird dinosaurs,
some interesting
they
physics.
might have the same type of pre-hatching behavior.
That's an orange brush as far as I can tell. Got some more cool... Oh, yeah. Alright, what do you think of that? I just want to talk briefly at the end of this about the number 72, because it has some interesting things. Well, it's half of a gross, or it's 6 dozen. A gross is a big thing that comes up. I remember all the time growing up reading the Oriental Trading Magazine, and it kind of fascinated me that everything, it's like you had to buy it in a gross, and how that's a dozen. So this is half of that, 72. And it has a ton of interesting mathematical properties because the number 72 is highly divisible. And this is a thing that comes up in math. Like the base 10 number system, the fact that we have a base 10 number system, not all cultures have done that. And there's reasons to have a different base number system, especially when it comes to things like divisibility. Like the number 10 is only divisible by the number 2 and 5. So there's been cultures in the past that used base 20 or like base 60, and there's so much more divisibility going on. So that's interesting. But more than that, the number 72 comes up with a regular pentagon. And this sort of stuff, I think, is that people in times past, math is a way to seek God. Because math is the nature of the creation, of God's creation, of the way that our minds work, of logic. God had to make logic. Or logic just works the way it does naturally. But I think that is the obsession with geometry and studying these things. Why they really like to pick up on these numbers, because it hints at God's creation, the way that God made the universe. And not that I believe in outer space spinny ball things, but just like ideas, truth. Math is just true. And so 72 pops up with the regular pentagon. So that's very important, of course. The pentagon, the shape, it's like the pentagram. Obviously, the satanic people like it. So 72, it could be a shout out to Baphomet or something. The pentagram. Let me start. This got kind of out of order. In religion, so if you go to just the Wikipedia article in the number 72, there's tons of interesting math properties. And I think it is an interesting, cool idea. Like one day we will be able to ask God about numbers and stuff. Like why each number, God knows why each number is special, and all of any special property that could ever be true about any number, God knows. Which is very fascinating. And I think part of, why people study number theory, why people are interested in these things, it's like learning about God when you learn about deep mathematical truths. And notice religion, this number 72 comes up a lot. Is it symbolic? Does it have to do with that Pentagon thing? Because even the whole 72 degrees things, like there is some human construct here at a certain point. Do we know that God uses 360 degrees in a full revolution? And to go back by the divisibility things, well, 36 is half of 72, and 36 is a highly divisible number. 6 times 6. It has tons of divisors. So that is part of at least one explanation for why we might use 360 degrees in a full rotation, because it's so heavily divisible. You can break it down, and you would want to do that. You would want to be able to divide a circle into many parts. And so I'm just saying 72, not every culture probably had 72. I think you would have to be using 360 degrees. 72 attached with the pentagon. Anyways, let me know if you know exactly why there's 360 degrees in one rotation. Maybe somebody has an interesting idea. Who knew they were getting a math lesson today? Well, I thought this was interesting. I'm just going to read through some of these. In religion, the number of languages spoken at the Tower of Babylon, according to later tradition, was 72. That just seems like gematria type things. And that they chose the number 72, not necessarily because it's like the literal number, but it could be. They were very into numbering things. Have you ever read the Bible when they pull out all the fish, when Jesus tells them throw your net on that side? And they pull it out, and they literally sat there and counted the number of fish that they pulled out. So they were very interested in counting the number of things, because I think they did want to get information from that. They were getting information from numbers, and specific numbers had special meaning. They were very into the symbolism of things. So if you counted how many of things there were and it came up as a certain number, that would be a sign. There's old depictions of Jewish people as being really into counting things. Have you heard about throwing a bunch of rice on the ground in front of a vampire because they got to count it? What else? I feel like I was going to say, 72. One possibility about 72 is that, in a gematria sense, is that it reduces to 9, which is a big number associated with Satan a lot, number 9. And it starts with a 7, which is a very powerful number. So 72, just on first glance, does seem as a very powerful number. 72 starts with a 7, it sums to 9. So could be, a lot of times there's not just one reason for things. A lot of times a number will have many different appeals to it. And I would almost say it's never just one thing. They're symbols, and different people make it out to be different things at different times. The number of companions. You start to, cases like this, like the number 72 had way too many entries in the religious things. I imagine, I didn't do this, I imagine if I went to the number 71, or if I went to the number 73, I imagine, could be wrong, that there wouldn't be as many entries in the religious things involving those numbers. So, like the fact that I'm seeing Zoroaster, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, the number 72 popping up a lot in religious things, it makes me feel like it could be a special number that people are using symbolically. And maybe it didn't equal exactly 72, but they wanted to portray a specific meaning using that number. It's the conventional number of disciples sent forth by Jesus in Luke 10. It's the number of names of God according to Kabbalah. I guess in the Catholic version, if you include the Book of Lamentations, if Lamentations is considered to be a part of the Book of Jeremiah, this was interesting, that the current distribution of the Book of Revelation is 22 chapters, but the oldest known division of the text is the Greek in 72 chapters. I don't know anything about in the Greek or in the other versions of the Bible. I just stick to King James myself. The degrees of Jacob's ladder were the number of 72, according to the Zohar. The number of disciples of Confucius who mastered his teachings. Some Jainism thing, some Egyptian creation thing. So, seems to be coming up a lot. This was interesting in whatever that is, the number of planets between hell and heaven. Seems like an important number. Let me know if you know any interesting things of 72. The number of demons sealed away by King Solomon 72 with the lesser key. Well, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. God bless everyone.